The Bills have some big decisions to consider now and in the future. I'm joined by Greg Tompsett to talk about them all today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Friday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. Well, folks, as we continue this bye-week discussion, I always like to take a moment and consider some of the big decisions that Brandon Beane has to make, not only right now, but in the future. And my guy that I always like to talk this stuff over with is Greg Tompsett of Cover One. And Greg, something hit me as I was getting ready to talk to you today, and it's that we don't really talk that much during the season. Off season, we're talking all the time, right? We're getting into stuff. We're just so busy in season with everything, we kind of just lose sight of some of that back and forth. And so I'm excited to kind of have a good checkpoint with you today on some of the stuff you and I are typically bantering about. So welcome and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Obviously, I think, a lot of people see our public personas, they see us on the shows, they see us, on social media and things like that. They don't realize that you and I also do a lot of the business and management and administration parts of some of the networks we're involved in. And that can get a little consuming during the season. So yeah, it is nice the bye week is great overall to be able to step back and get our bearings. And I love being able to catch up with you.
How you feeling, Greg? How you feeling about this Bills football team? I mean, they're doing well. They're 5-1. It feels like they don't really have any huge issues, but outside of injuries, what's your greatest concern as we look at this team the rest of the way?
So obviously I feel great. Aaron and I joked that, it's hard not to come off like a homer. Like, even if you're just predicting realistic things, we went last night game by game and I can't pick a loss for you. I'm not going to predict that we never lose again, but I can't pick one out to be like, that's the one that we're definitely going to lose. We're going to be favored in every game the rest of the season. Even the good teams on the road, we're going to be favored. Ain't nobody better than in Kansas City, and we were already favored there. So I mean, they're literally the number 2 in every betting metric. So if I had to pick something, and obviously you touched on it, health is the number 1. But from an actual schematic standpoint, I'd say continued development from the defensive backs. Obviously we've seen what injuries can do. We had games without either Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde, games without any of Poyer, Hyde, and White. It seems like we're going to have Trey White back here after the bye. Jordan Poyer seems to be doing okay, although serious enough, he wasn't even allowed to fly back with the team. So I would say continued development from Damar Hamlin, continued development from whoever becomes the longer term play with Elam and Benford. I've, talked about it a lot that Elam was a bet on traits and upside, and that I think we're starting to see the flashes of that. And I hope we have a, player that down the stretch into the playoffs is showing, this is why he was the number 1 pick, but we need one of those guys to really step up and battle Dane Jackson for that spot. So I'll put my cards there that, this is a passing league. I don't think anybody's going to shut us down offensively, but it doesn't mean somebody can't outscore us. And the way to outscore us is, missed tackles from players in the secondary, giving up 40-yard Juju Smith-Schuster touchdowns. That would be it. So DB development would be my number 1 concern.
Do you have any thoughts on what to do about all these DBs? I mean, let's live in a world where they're all healthy. You don't have to include Micah Hyde because he's not coming back this year. But let's say the point in time where Trey White is ready to play full games every snap, which is he's going to do that. What are you doing here? Like, who's CB2? Who do you rotate? How do you prioritize playing time for Benford and Elam? We've longed for this problem, Greg. It's here. What are we doing?
So one, it is a great problem. And you are in a position where if something happens, and something could be an injury, something could be a bad game. Like, hey, somebody just doesn't have it today.
Yeah.
Having the option of a quick hook, because we have guys who have time on task, who have reps in Leslie Frazier's system, who are in that situation, is a great luxury to have. And to be in a spot where we can do that is great. My preference is that the development leads to more options for the higher end traits and talent to play, because it gives you the versatility to mix in man. So I want to see in the playoffs Trey White, Taron Johnson, Kyer Elam, DeMar Hamlin, Jordan Poyer. I want it to be Kyer Elam as the starter and those guys as backups. If we're still in a phase where it becomes a rotation, I do think it'll be Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam. But again, Benford won that job early on. So it's crazy that we have legitimately 3 different options at a critical spot. My preference is it's Elam and White.
Yeah, I like what you said. Something there to help me settle on what I want to do. I should always side with the traits, right? Elam has the traits. And he can take away the football, right? He's got ball skills. That's we knew it at Florida, and we've now seen it to show up with the Bills. So I thank you. You helped me settle in on a question I knew I was going to have to answer at some point. Greg, let's get into some of these decisions that Brandon Beane has to make, and I think you have to start decisions by understanding what you have at your disposal to allow you to do something. And I think we have to start by reflecting on what this team's current cap position is. So if you can get us up to speed there, and then any immediate flexibility that they have. I know you always talk about coupons and all that type of stuff. What's available right now?
So the current one is, and it depends on where you look, it's roughly like the $1.4 to $1.6 million range. That's not necessarily a flaw with one website versus another. It's that number is legitimately moving all the time. You know, when you do the Andre Smith release, when you do the practice squad call-ups, when you do a player moving to IR and a replacement on the 53, each of those are $40,000 here, $50,000 there, $60,000 there. Oh, you recouped a little bit on that one. That number's moving all the time. And that's why Brandon Beane wants that in-season cushion. And I would say right now, we have barely enough of that to function the rest of the season, where with no other moves, we could probably finish the season and not get into a giant situation last year where they literally couldn't have 53 men on their roster in week 18 because they couldn't afford to call a player up because they didn't have another dollar to spend. So what that means is we can't do any other fun stuff unless we do another move. We've already used a lot of the coupons. All the coupons have been used except for 2. Tre'Davious White is still available. He cannot be restructured until he's on the 53-man roster. So that seems to be a formality that's going to be coming soon here. He actually has a sizable one. We just saw what Kansas City did with Travis Kelce, where they freed up, upwards of $4.3 million, I believe the number was. Trey White has a $9.95 million one. We've actually already paid out 35% of that. So any numbers you see from any salaries out there, we're 35% into the season. Those game checks have been paid out. We have about 65% left. You then take the proration over the remaining part of his deal. We could actually free up between 4.9 and 5.1 million with Trey White doing a base salary restructure. We could actually also do the same thing for Josh Allen. He has a pretty low salary this year, but it is 4.1 million. Again, we've already paid out a little chunk of that. We could free up another 2.1 million with Josh Allen. Those 2 players are incredibly low risk restructures because there's no chance you're going to be releasing them in the next couple of years. You're simply shuffling dollars around. So we could create up to $7 million if we wanted to, but just one of those would give us the flexibility to make any realistic in-season move if we had one available to us.
In just a moment, I'm going to ask Greg if there's anything he wants Brandon Beane to do this season to add pieces or a piece for the stretch run. But first, I have a sports analogy for you. When it comes to burglars, your home is like the end zone, and you do the absolute strongest defense you can muster. This is why I use and trust SimpliSafe Home Security. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. It's cutting-edge technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back, so you always know when your home is safe. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and threats to your home. You can customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL. You save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, Greg. So here we are, 5-1, Super Bowl aspirations.
Yeah.
Are you sitting here hoping that a move is made to push the chips in and get over the hump, or has that already been done?
So your last sentence is a key one. I'm one of those people, I've put it out there on social media a couple times. I want a trophy. I've rooted for this team my entire life. I've been a sports fanatic my entire life. I don't know that there's ever been a team that I was legitimately like emotionally invested in that I've watched win a championship ever in my life. Like maybe the 2016 Cavs living in Cleveland's the closest I got, but that's just not even in the remote ballpark of my passion for the Buffalo Bills. So I'm all for sustainable long-term planning after I get a trophy. Let me get one, and then every decision will be the sustainable long-term thing. Until then, I'm okay with some risk taking. I'm okay with some chips moving into the middle. So the good part is, and you touch on your last phrase there, we've already done some of that. Von Miller is that calculated risk. Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Daquan Jones. Good Lord, Daquan Jones. Roger Saffold, who hasn't quite paid off yet. Those are the calculated risks. We didn't think they had any cap space. Brandon Beane kept virtually every priority free agent and added 11 more when we thought they had no money. So we've already done a lot of that. But would I be upset if they went and brought in a dynamic weapon out of the backfield? No, I'd be okay with that. If they added even a moderate, heck, you made a, oh, be quiet, Siri. Even if you added a moderate safety depth, you went and got Dean Marlowe, I'd be okay with that. You have a struggling team who has an expiring contract at guard. I think that one's easier said than done. I don't think we've even seen Bates and Saffold and everybody playing their best under Aaron Kromer. That's a lot of gelling and time on task. Inserting a running back, a wide receiver, an edge rusher in season is way more plug and play than an offensive lineman. But I wouldn't be upset with any of those. And then I saw enough from our starting slot receiver on Sunday that I'm ready for an upgrade there if one presented itself as well. I'm good with Khalil Shakir getting more of a role going forward, but I'd love for him to be a luxury wide receiver 4 that we benefit from rather than a every down wide receiver 3 we're depending on in the playoffs. So that's another spot. So I think running back and receiver are the easiest ones. The nice part is everything I just rattled off is gravy and bonus on top. We have the best roster in the NFL. We have the best team in the NFL. We can win without them. But would I want more toys? Absolutely.
Yeah, I like what you said there. Khalil Shakir is kind of rookie season Gabe Davis, right? That fourth, it's perfect for him. But
overqualified wide receiver 4.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in time, he becomes the more featured part of what's going on. But
and he will he will be.
Oh, there's no question. Yeah, they need it, right? Because I got into this with Nate Geary a little bit. Man, Dawson Knox 14 million, Stephon Diggs 25. Gabe's going to be a 20-plus guy. If Mike Williams is a 20-plus guy, that's a 20-plus guy. Josh is 45 or whatever. I mean, you're going to have a lot of money tied up here. So you need Khalil Shakir on a 5th-round deal or whatever, to balance things out and provide a meaningful contribution. So I think we're pretty aligned there. And so I guess that kind of satisfies the right now. Okay, this is what the Bills have. This is what they can do in terms of creating flexibility. And those are the ideas for how they could, make sure they have everything that they need to seize this opportunity this year, which allows us to kind of focus in on the offseason coming. And where I want to start this conversation is in the exact same spot we started the little mini, okay, right now. What is a team's cap position entering next offseason? And then I'll let you kind of just go right into the opportunities that Beane would have to create cap space, because I know that's really where the answer comes.
Yeah, so it starts with a scary number. If any fans open up the standard websites, you go to Spot Track, you go to Over the Cap, you're going to see projections that show us already like $7 million over the cap. That's with not having Jordan Poyer, Tremaine Edmonds, Devin Singletary, Jordan Phillips, lots of feasible, important players, even on the roster, already 7 million over. That's going to cause a lot of anxiety. First, before we even get to what the Bills can do, I think those estimates are pretty conservative. A lot of those are looking at like a roughly $10 million increase. That was the former standard step-by-step that we saw. And most fans know, hey, I think that's going to get bigger because of the TV money. It 100% is. Teams are planning on that. That was budgeted into how it's supposed to increase. And we'll start seeing, based on that, it would be $12 million increases, $15 million increases down the line, maybe 20. What people are not counting on and what the NFL is aware of but hasn't like budgeted formally is the influx of gambling revenue coming into the league, which is a huge amount of money, which has been much greater than was anticipated. I think that's going to start showing that those longer term increases that people seem like, oh, that looks like a crazy year-to-year jump, are going to accelerate. And that we may see next year may immediately be a $15 or $18 million increase, where all of a sudden that makes it that we're spot on. We're not over the cap at all before we do anything. I think in the coming years, you could see in 2 years, it's already $25 million in 1 year. I don't think we're far off from a $30, $35, $40 million increase in a single year because of the huge TV deal plus the gambling revenue coming in. So now you turn it to what can Brandon Beane and his team do. Now there's a long list, but the two biggest ones are Von Miller and Josh Allen. So Josh Allen got a huge check this year that was spread out in an option bonus that was already negotiated. But each year, you're now going to have either a large base salary or another roster bonus that you can simply pay out and pay him. Or every single year, you have a free coupon to say, do we want to kick part of this down the road, split it up into 5 pieces, and spread this out over that time? Next year is the first one. Everybody looks like, oh man, his cap number jumps all the way up to $43 million. Look at that big base salary. All they have to do is snap their fingers. That base salary drops from $27.5 million down to $5 million. You create $22 million in an instant just to keep Josh Allen. I feel pretty confident we're going to keep Josh Allen.
Yeah.
The one I was more questioning was Von Miller. So I saw, hey, when they structured this, 6 years wasn't an accident. 6 years means that you can do a signing bonus in year 1 and then an option or roster bonus in year 2 that you can also prorate over the life of the deal. What was a 33-year-old pass rusher? So I was, debating on, hey, that sounds great, but do I want to prorate a 33-year-old pass rusher in year 2? Well, I won't lie. After seeing him for 6 games, yeah, I'm good with that. And, will there be some cost in maybe having to move on in year 4? Sure. I'll deal with that in 2025. I'll figure that out later on. That one's $11 million. So just 2 players on very simple restructures that we pretty clearly are not going to want to release to get away from. I just created $33 million in cap space instantly. There's also base salary restructures for Deion Dawkins, Stephon Diggs, Trey White, Matt Milano, Mitch Morse, and Ed Oliver extension, releasing an Isaiah McKenzie, tons of other options where I could, with no pain, I could create $62 million in cap space if I wanted to leverage every coupon. So Brandon Beane has every option he wants. He can do whatever he wants. It's a matter of choosing, not a matter of whether they can create cap space.
62 million?
Yeah.
And that doesn't even include for your discussion points on the gambling revenue.
No, correct. That is simply us creating cap space. That's not with any increase. That's if they just did the base increase. If it just went up 10 million and we went in 7 million over, I could get us to $55 million under with no extra money from the TV deal, no extra money from the gambling revenue.
Unbelievable.
I could get us to 55 million if we wanted to. And again, I say this all the time on Twitter. If I can do it, Brandon Beane and his staff are smarter and know the intricacies more than I do. They can do it too.
Make it make sense, Greg. Are the Bills just smarter than everybody in the world? What is it, man? Because not every team does. You say this and it sounds so easy, but other teams in the Greg Tompsett of whatever other team that exists out there that knows this stuff, they don't have this. What's going on, man?
The biggest difference is a willingness from ownership to cut checks. And the Bills were on the other side of this coin for a long time. All the stuff we used to hear about cash to cap and that kind of balance was that, hey, a lot of owners, before you get into the Stan Kroenkes and billionaire crazy people, there's a lot of people where their only asset is that football team.
Yeah.
And Ralph Wilson was like that. The Brown family in Cincinnati is like that. Many other teams are like that, where, hey, I don't have extra $500 million in cash sitting around to cut checks and just to let you play around with the cap. Terry Pegula, for any flaws, and I know some Sabres fans may not love the Pegulas as much as we do. Terry Pegula is my favorite kind of owner. He hires smart people, he gets out of the way, and he cuts big checks. That's all I want. It's all I want as an owner. Hire smart people, get out of the way, cut big checks. All the crazy stuff that we yell about with the Rams or with the Saints and like, oh, the cap is a myth. Well, if you're willing to spend cash up front, you can play with that money a lot. We saw, Von Miller signed a 6-year, $120 million deal. For any Bills fan listening, his cap hit this year is $5 million. Well, how can you have $5 million? Because that's the way they structured it. Because you can play around with stuff. He got plenty of cash this year, I promise. He got a big old check, but his cap hit is $5 million. So all those different pieces, you can do that over and over and over again with each of these deals and squeeze them and press them. And, hey, we'll guarantee the money, but you won't get it till next spring, but it's guaranteed. They're fine with that. All those different pieces, we have an owner willing to cut checks, and we have a GM and a business side, Jim Overdorf and those guys who know all the tricks, which we've known about for a decade. But the Bills never used void years. The Bills never used guaranteed option bonuses in the second year on a 6-year deal. We never played with those tools. Now we play with all of them.
Greg, you have my mind spinning here, and I've got some follow-ups here that I'm going to get to in just a moment. But first, betonline.net, your number one source for football betting and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. So, Greg, I was all prepared to sit here and talk about the prioritization of these expiring contracts and Jordan Poyer and Tremaine Edmonds and Jordan Phillips and how Brandon Beane's going to make all this work. And I guess I just heard from you that there's not a whole lot to be concerned about.
So I will dial back a little bit. I'll guarantee you he doesn't pull every single lever and doesn't create $62 million in cap space. He could.
I don't need 62. Half of that's fine.
Well, and I'm virtually certain we see the half number. I'm virtually certain he gets us to the 30-ish.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a touch over that. And then he keeps the other things in his back pocket that you leverage when the opportunity presents itself. In the same way, we'll go through a handful of players here who are coming up next year and how we prioritize it. You can also play with those numbers very easily and structure them in a way where, like we joked with Von Miller and, Josh Allen's contract for this year, where you're looking at, a player who's a huge player in our structure, but has a very manageable, cap hit, and that he's only counting 10 million against the cap, and we could lower that even further. Those ideas are available for each of these. So we'll start with Jordan Poyer. I'm super torn on if his priority and value has increased or decreased so far, because
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
we've seen that Miami game was terrifying, not having him on the field. He's also had 3 different injuries so far and just had to ride back in a car from Kansas City. I'm I know that we've had reports that Micah Hyde's surgery went well, but I also remember the Eric Wood situation where he thought he was going to continue on as well. Anytime there's a neck situation, I'm at minimum going to be cautious and concerned until I see the player on the field. All those different pieces in the pot, I can see an argument where the team says, hey, that's too much risk. We have to move on. I can also see the argument where, hey, we weren't ready to move on from both Micah and Jordan at the same time. We need to bring him back. I have a number at 2 years, 25 million, with a pretty healthy amount of that guaranteed, even into the second year, where we say, hey, we're committing to you for 2 more seasons. You're talking about age 32 and 33. We've seen plenty of safeties be, successful in that role. If Rosenhaus is putting out feelers and somebody's going to blow him away with a Harrison Smith kind of contract, God bless him. Go get that money and do what you got to do. But I'm okay bringing him back, and I'm okay doing a bit more here because 2 years is very manageable for us. We can make that work.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic, Greg. If he gets the Harrison Smith deal from somebody, it's going to be a pretty desperate attempt. And isn't there something to be said for the situation that he's in, the playoff checks that you get, right? There's I know that could be offset by state income tax. There's a lot of things that can come into play here, but you just kind of wonder, what's the most important thing for him? Because he's still going to get paid really well. If he takes 2 years, 25, which is kind of where I've been with it, that's good money.
Oh yeah.
But is that the only thing? Does he want 15 or 16 that he can get from somebody else? What do you think the priority for Poyer is?
So Poyer, legitimately more than any other player we're about to talk about, is impacted by how the season ends. If we win a championship this year and win a Super Bowl this year, I think he's going to feel okay taking every dollar and would be okay signing a huge Godfather deal from Atlanta or Houston or Jacksonville or Chicago or whoever throws a boatload of money at him to bring in a Super Bowl caliber pedigree leader in their locker room. And if they want to pay $4 million with 3 years of that, 4 years with 3 years of it guaranteed at $15 million a year, God bless him. Good.
Sure.
He's earned it. Go get your money. I think him more than anyone else, how the season ends and what you're coming back for or what you just helped accomplish is a bigger trigger for him than any of these other players.
Let's talk Tremaine Edmunds. Playing the best football of his career. I think even the doubters are coming around, Greg. I know it's a battle you and the guys over at Cover One have fought for a while now. I think people are finally understanding. Young player, leader of the defense. I want him. What's that going to cost?
So I'm torn on. I agree with everything you just said. The him being a captain, him being a leader, number one, defense in the league, number one DVOA, everything that we're seeing. I think the highlight of him having the sight adjustment where he saw Travis Kelce come back in and then called off that change and communicated it is a great example of where he's not going to register anywhere on the stat sheet of accomplishing that play, but was a huge part of recognizing it, making the call, adjusting everybody, communicating it across the board, and boom, we have a huge defensive play to get the ball back. My challenge comes into, I think he is both playing his best football and hasn't quite taken the huge step forward I was hoping in the big time splash plays, and that I think we're seeing even more of those from Matt Milano, and that both of them are playing their best football. Both of them are playing incredibly well. And I think both of them are because we have the best defensive line and defensive tackles in front of them we've ever had. And it's made me question myself on, okay, I just watched Damar Hamlin come in for Micah Hyde. I was terrified of that. I didn't think he was ready for that. And the scheme has still been really good. Could we plug a first round pick linebacker into that spot and not spend $27 million a year at linebacker? And that's where it comes into me. If we can keep him for 12, 13, maybe 14 million. I think I can fit it. I think I can structure it. He's another one where you could do a 6-year deal with a initial signing bonus and a second year option bonus, spread it all out, and he'll still barely hit 30 at the end of the deal. Because again, the constant running joke, Tremaine Edmonds is just turning 19. If he gets to the point where, hey, you looked really good and we have some good defensive tackles on this team, and somebody wants to get crazy, I don't think he's going to get Fred Warner, Darius Leonard money, but all of a sudden it's 17 and a half, $18 million. And he plays linebacker, which the NFL has completely messed up and doesn't, the salary, the franchise tag counts Von Miller and Khalil Mack and Nick Bosa. We can't franchise tag him. It's going to, the franchise tag is almost $18 million. They have leverage. He's in a good spot. And if they put out feelers and find out, hey, we're here in 17 and a half, $18 million, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can dedicate, not because he's not worth it. I don't know if I can dedicate $29 million a year to linebacker with everything that we have going on.
Yeah.
So for him, it's the number that matters more than anything else. And that I think if we can keep it within the realm of, possibility that we can keep it down in the $13-14 million range, we can fit it. They can go above that, and he might deserve that, but it gets harder each dollar you go up.
Yep. All right. I got you there. So the dollar amount, the key thing with Tremaine, and your belief in the scheme that if it doesn't work out, that there's a, potentially a high pick next year. One thing that I don't know that we consider enough with the Tremaine Edmonds discussion as far as being predictive with it, right, is I had this, I don't know if it's an epiphany, but I had this realization literally today when I was thinking about this, that the first player Brandon Beane ever drafted was Josh Allen. The second one was Tremaine Edmonds. Predictively, like, take all the stuff we just talked about out of the equation. There's got to be some level of, I'm keeping my guy.
I think it's a tiebreaker. I think it's an element that will push us higher, will push him higher than I'm comfortable with.
Sure.
But there's still a tipping point. There's still a tipping point there. Maybe that's the reason he's comfortable at 15 and 16 million, where I'm comfortable at 13 and 14, and he gets iffy at 17 or 18, but he'll do 16 million a year, and he'll do, 4 years, $64 million, or 5 years, $80 million, and spread it out. Heck, 6 years, $96 million, and really play with the numbers and spread it out. And he's comfortable at that number. I'm not quite there yet. Again, not him, not my judgment on him. The fact that we already spent on Milano and that we're going to have to make tough choices. At some point, there has to be like lines drawn of where you'll go and where you won't go. I'm sure Beane's number might be higher than mine.
Let's talk about Devin Singletary. Expiring contract, and I don't know, like, I'm not comfortable with the Bills running backs that aren't named Devin Singletary right now. He's the best one, and it's quite clear he's been good since he's been drafted, right? He's just never been a high volume guy. But when you think about how he turned it on late last year, what he's meant to this team again this year, the way Josh Allen talks about him, I'm not a big pay running backs guy, Greg, but this guy feels like if it could be modest, you might do it. What does that deal look like, and what's your appetite for it?
So my same comments on Jordan Poyer about the outcome of the season team-wise, he's the biggest one hanging in the balance, where I need to see what the rest of the season looks like out of that backfield. Once he starts splitting carries with Christian McCaffrey, I think that's going to have a big difference. Just kidding.
You went Von Miller Odell right there, just speaking in absolutes. I'm like, did he say that? I didn't think Greg was a hot take guy. Breaking news here? Like, what's going on?
So, assuming that there's no crazy deal for a backfield mate of any kind, do we see a step forward from James Cook? Do we see a difference in usage for James Cook? Do we see, does Zach Moss ever see the field again? Do we see a chance for snaps from Duke Johnson getting some snaps? I think there's the most variance of any material spot in the lineup at running back, where I think it's going to remain Devin Singletary. I don't think they're going to make a key acquisition, but like I like to throw around a non-zero chance. it's crazy for anyone to think that there's no chance that they add a running back that I don't, whatever Josh Jacobs, Antonio Gibson, Cam Akers, Melvin Gordon, Christian McCaffrey, there's a fair amount of pieces floating out there with pretty low base salaries that the right team gets desperate at the right moment. And we say, hey, you want to know what? We need that one other piece. And they make a little bit of a move. That's a direct impact on Devin Singletary immediately. Assuming nothing crazy like that happens, assuming we don't see a big ascension from James Cook, I'm nervous if we can afford Singletary. So I just like you, I do not want to pay running backs, but there's a number I'd give him. Ideally Devin Singletary is a 1B in a backfield, but you're telling me 3 years, 12 million at 4 million a year, and we could play with the first year cap hit to probably make it like 2.5. Sure. I'll give Devin Singletary 4 million. I like Devin Singletary's commitment, availability, loyalty so much. I'll guarantee him 9.5 of that 12 million. I'll guarantee him 2.5 years worth of that contract. So he doesn't have to worry. But I can't go on a big number. If somebody wants to give him the going rate for running backs has been like 6 million for people like legit contributors. The 3-year, $18 million deal floated out for a bunch of people. I can't give Devin Singletary $6 million. I just can't. It's too replaceable. There's too many options in the draft every year. We have other cheap guys. I don't know. Like, I think Devin Singletary is our best back, but if you're telling me our backfield is, Duke Johnson, James Cook, and Zach Moss, is our offense materially different, like significantly different? I just can't do it. So I like Devin Singletary. He's a great story. Josh Allen likes Devin Singletary. I'm okay with 3 or 4 million. I can't go over that.
Let's close on this, Greg. Jordan Phillips is an expiring contract. Shaq Lawson, Roger Saffold. The Bills will have to figure out QB2, punter, offensive line depth, the Tyler Matikaviches of the world, the Taiwan Joneses of the world. I know a lot of that takes care of itself, right, with low-level deals, and the Bills have done well to fill out their roster. But is there any of these players in this kind of class of expiring deals that stand out to you as priorities or interesting conversations?
I'll say I love what I've seen from Sam Martin. He's welcome back on my football team in perpetuity. So I don't want to pay big money, but if he wants to come back on a reasonable deal because he likes being on a winning team that doesn't have to punt much, God bless him.
11 punts in 6 games.
It's
kind of a lot more. Like if you take out the fourth quarter, like he might have like 9 punts.
Yeah,
in 6 games.
It's it's easy money. If you want to come back, keep making easy money, come on back to Buffalo. Out of all those, Jordan Phillips is by far the biggest priority for me. He wants to, he's also going to be turning 31 next season. So there's a limit to what I want to play with, but he wants another 1 year, $5 million deal that we play with a number. Absolutely. He's shown that he is worth that. He is that kind of disruptive presence. I'm good to keep running that back 1 year at a time, however we want to do, or with, whatever multiple year deal plays with the number to get his number lower. Whatever we need to do is fine. Obviously, right now, we haven't seen anything from Saffold that makes me want to bring him back. I'm open to the possibility that could happen, or whoever next year's Roger Saffold is, or maybe draft investment. We'll see. So all those guys, I don't think there's a ton of huge groundbreaking priorities. I think that we see both Ed Oliver and Gabe Davis type extensions around the same time as Dawson Knox and Trey White right up to the season next year. I think we see both of them get extended for pretty significant deals, but before they get to free agency, but all the way right up to the season. Everything else they'll figure out as they go, and we'll kind of play with it as we get in there. And that, like I said, whether one of those guys who doesn't get retained is the first 2 picks in the draft priority. Is it a guard? Is it a safety? Is it a linebacker? Some of those spots will all of a sudden become a priority.
20 million seemed like the number for you with Gabe. I think that Mike Williams number.
Yeah. It's really hard not to see that number, that ballpark. Maybe they play with it. Christian Kirk's deal was actually closer to 16, 18 million. Yeah. Maybe it's one of those where the sticker shock number for the agent says 20, but the reality says it's 16 plus some incentives. I think that's the range. I think Gabe Davis is fantastic. I also think Gabe Davis benefits a great deal from 100%. Stephon Diggs being opposite him. I don't know that Gabe Davis has the route tree and the full skill set to go somewhere else and be Stephon Diggs.
No.
So I do think there's a tier there. And I do think the Christian Kirk, Mike Williams tier of the world, Gabe Davis absolutely deserves to be there. That's what those guys get paid.
Yeah.
I don't know that Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs tier of the world. People blend those together as like, oh, that's just what big time receivers make. Now, there's a difference in those numbers. He's in that 1B tier, and he's an elite 1B, but he's a 1B.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Greg, this has been fantastic. As always, I appreciate you coming on. I've been so captivated by everything you've had to say that I've forgotten to give you an opportunity to talk about everything that you have going on at Cover One, which everybody should be checking out. Go ahead, Greg. Tell people what they need to know about your work.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You guys can check us out here. A lot of the same places you enjoy Locked On Bills. All your social media platforms were available via podcast. You can find us on YouTube. Looking at Cover One, you can find me at Greg Tompsett on social media. Always having a good time with Bills fans, checking it out, and hopefully continuing on this fun, magical season.
Yeah, I learn things when I pay attention to Greg and the guys over at Cover One. So make sure that you guys are dialed in and making yourself the best Bills fan you can be, the most informed for sure. If Cover One's not part of that equation for you, I'd factor it in because those guys are awesome. So, Greg, thanks. I appreciate that, brother. Thank you for joining me. We're not done this week. We're gonna have a Saturday podcast for you. I got to give you my prospects to watch. Right, it couldn't be a week without telling you who to watch. I'm going to give some love to the Syracuse Orange. Been getting a little crap for not talking about them. So we're going to give you a full conversation on Syracuse players you can watch on Saturday in their big game against Clemson. Of course, the other games as well. And then Dr. Kyle Trimble, we're going to talk about all the stuff, right? The Jordan Poyer stuff, the Spencer Brown. And of course, we got some ACL stuff we're going to get into. So come on back for a Saturday episode tomorrow. Make sure that you don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. For Greg Tompsett, I'm Joe Marino. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.